Hello, I'm Kelsey, a misfit with a passion for crafting and creating. Hey there friends, welcome back to my little crafty corner of the internet. While shopping at a thrift store recently, I came across this little Barbie stand. I think it was originally part of a produce playset. Since it didn't come with any of the accessories, I decided to transform it into something of my own. The obvious choice would have been to lean into the produce theme and fill it with handmade fruits and veggies, but I wanted to do something a little different. That's when it hit me. Transform it into a lemonade stand. I thought it could make for such a cute little setup. So here's my plan. I'll be making two choices of lemonade, classic and strawberry. Each one will be displayed in its own drink dispenser, sitting on the top counter of the stand. Below that, there are two slanted shelves that need to be filled as well. On the top shelf, I'll be placing lemon cookies as an extra item for Barbie to sell along with her lemonade. The bottom shelf will have a crate of lemons and a crate of strawberries, as if that's the fresh produce Barbie uses to make her lemonade. As for the look of the stand, I'll be replacing the shade awning with a striped yellow and pink pattern. And on top of that, I'll add a lemonade sign. Hanging just under the awning and above the drink dispensers will be a small menu displaying the prices for the lemonade and cookies. And on the side of the stand, I'll be adding a little shelf for a cash register. Because Barbie's not just giving away her lemonade for free. She's a smart businesswoman. To make the whole setup even cuter, I wanted to string yellow and pink flag banners from the top of the stand out to some poles, creating a little area where Barbies can come and hang out and enjoy lemonade. And for seating, I'll actually be using the patio furniture set I made in a previous video, so this is kind of a little continuation of that build. I started by making the lemonade drink dispensers first, since they were the most important part of this build. I actually bought some miniature jars I thought would be perfect for them. But when they arrived, they were way smaller than I expected. So back to the drawing board. Luckily, I had several small round storage containers just sitting around that were much closer to the size I wanted. The only problem was making them look less like craft containers and more like actual drink dispensers. My first step was cutting off the top section where the lid grooves are, which alone already made them look better. Next, I wanted to create lids that had a little more character, something similar to the look of the small jars I originally bought. I ended up using these other very small, shallow containers, the same ones I used in my cookie tin video, and cut the grooves off the tops of those as well. Then I figured out by layering the shallow container, the lid from one of the small jars, and a circle that I cut from a thin piece of clear plastic, I could build a lid that kinda looked fancy, just like ones you'd see on a real dispenser. Before I could attach the lids though, I needed to fill the dispensers with lemonade first. For the lemonade itself, I used epoxyresin tinted yellow for the classic and pink for the strawberry. To really sell the effect, I glued fake lemon and strawberry slices along the inner sides of each container. Once the epoxy was poured in, the fruit would look like it was floating inside. I also dropped a few extra fruit slices directly in each epoxy mixture for even more fruit. And since I already had epoxy mixed up, I went ahead and poured some into the miniature glasses I bought as well. While everything was curing, I moved on to making the spouts for the dispensers. I cut small spout shapes out of EVA foam, glued a little handle piece on top of each one, and painted them silver to give them that classic dispenser look. After many hours of waiting, the epoxy was finally cured. I glued all the lid pieces onto the tops of the dispensers. Then I attached the spouts to the fronts, and honestly, they came out so cute. I was so happy with how they turned out. Next, I moved on to making the cookies. I decided to go with two types, a lemon-shaped sugar cookie and what I'm calling a lemon drop cookie. Both were made using oven-baked clay. The lemon drop cookies are pretty simple, just a round cookie base with frosting on top and a little lemon slice sitting in the center. For the sugar cookies, I cut the base into a teardrop shape, then layered a smaller teardrop of yellow clay on top to look like a lemon. I added a tiny green leaf and poked the surface of the clay a little to give it some more detail. Once all the cookies were baked, I brushed on a thin coat of clear nail polish to give them a little shine. Now, I'll be honest, the cookies were darker than I was going for, and in hindsight, I wish I had used a slightly lighter brown for the bases. But I wasn't about to remake them, so we're just going with it. Since I already had the clay out, I went ahead and made the fruit for the crates on the bottom shelf too. For the lemons, I did my best to shape yellow clay into something recognizable as a lemon. After baking, I topped a few of them off with a small green leaf made out of paper. For the strawberries, I didn't have any red clay on hand, so I made them out of white clay and painted them after baking instead. For the little green leaves at the top, I rolled out thin, pointy pieces of green clay and pressed them into the tops of each strawberry, folding the ends down slightly. The green ended up being a bit brighter than ideal against the red, but just like the cookies, I decided to move on rather than start over. Next up were the crates for the fruit. For these, I used popsicle sticks, and honestly, it's a pretty straightforward process since a crate is essentially just a little slatted box. Once I had all 4 walls built, I glued them onto a cardboard base rather than bothering to glue popsicle sticks together for the bottom. Since the fruit would be covering it up anyway, there was no point. I filled each crate with the lemons and strawberries, and just like that, the fruit crates were done. After finishing the crates, I realized the cookies needed something to sit on too, so I quickly made a little cookie sheet. I cut wood kebab skewers on an angle to create the raised edges, glued them onto a piece of cardstock, and painted the whole thing silver. Simple, but effective. And with that, I had everything I needed for the shelves. Time to move on to the stand itself. The first order of business was clearing off anything that would get in the way of attaching the menu later. There was a tiny hook and a broken little produce scale on the stand that needed to go, so I removed them both with my Dremel. Then I took the awning off and hit it with a white primer to cover up the original design. My original plan was to paint the stripes directly onto the awning, but I was worried I wouldn't get clean enough lines that way. So I switched to a stick-on vinyl instead. I laid yellow vinyl over the entire awning first, then added pink stripes onto the top and trimmed away the excess. I'm really glad I went that route because it came out much more crisp. Once it was done, I popped the awning back onto the stand. As for the stand itself, it's already a blue color I really like, so I decided to leave it as is. Next up was the lemonade sign and menu. Instead of just slapping the word lemonade on a sign, I decided this stand deserved a proper business name. Because Barbie is a true entrepreneur. I landed on the name Sweet Citrus and designed a full logo to go with it. Since I was keeping the stand's original blue color, I pulled that into the branding as well, making the color palette blue, yellow, and pink, which ties everything together real nicely. Beyond just the sign and menu, I also wanted to make little cookie sleeves and napkins printed with this Sweet Citrus logo, just to really round out the whole business aesthetic. Once all the designs were finished, I printed everything out. To give the sign and menu a little more structure, I backed them with some blue plastic I salvaged from a dishwasher soap packaging. Then it was just a matter of attaching the sign to the top of the awning and hanging the menu underneath it. As for the napkins and cookie sleeves, I cut them out and folded them into shape. They are just those cute little finishing touches I love in these kinds of projects. Now I needed a cash register. I wanted it to blend into the rest of the stand as much as possible, so I decided to use the same blue plastic I used for the lemonade sign for the countertop. I glued 2 small square pieces of wood onto the back side of the plastic, trimmed the plastic down, and painted the wood white, giving the shelf a clean white underside with a blue top that ties right into the stand. For the support bracket underneath, I cut 4 triangles out of the plastic and glued them together into a triangle brace. I glued one side of the support onto the stand where I wanted the shelf to sit. Then I attached the shelf on top, and just like that, it was secured. Now I needed a cash register. I dug through my craft room and pulled together a few supplies, some pre-cut pieces of wood, a popsicle stick, and the little grippy section of a pen, which I cut on an angle because it's going to act as the tilted stand that holds the monitor up. You'll see what I mean. I also wanted to make a little tap-to-pay stand to go along with the register. For that, I glued 3 small pieces of popsicle stick together into a triangle shape and covered the sides with cardstock to clean it up. Once I had the basic shapes of both built, I painted them silver off camera. I designed graphics for the register screen, the number pad, and the tap-to-pay screen and printed them out and glued them into place. Added a coat of clear nail polish on top to give everything a nice little finish. The last thing to make was the flag banners. I started with the poles that will hold them up. For each pole, I used kebab skewers and a bottle cap as the base. I drilled a wide hole into the top of each bottle cap so I could fit 3 skewers into it. I trimmed off the pointy ends and glued them into place. On the underside of each cap, I filled it with hot glue to add some weight and keep the poles stable and upright. Then, off camera, I painted them all white. At this point, I also made a small change to my original plan. Instead of attaching the banners directly to the stand, I decided to make one banner that simply hangs between the 2 poles as a standalone piece. That way I have a lot more flexibility in how I set up and style this playset both now and in the future. For the banner itself, I cut triangle flags out of blue, yellow, and pink cardstock. Glued them along a white string, and then secured each end to its own pole. Simple, but charming. I think all that is left now is to set up the lemonade stand and enjoy the final reveal. Okay, maybe it's just me, but I think this turned out so much cuter as a lemonade stand than it ever would have as a produce stand. I'm absolutely in love with how the drink dispensers and the little cookies in the sleeves came out. It's those little details that really bring a project like this to life and makes it feel like a complete little world. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to know what your favorite detail for this build is. Drop it in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button so you don't miss my next creation. If you love miniatures, Barbie projects, paper crafts, and all kinds of creative DIYs, you're definitely in the right place. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in my next crafty adventure. Bye!